There we go. Yes, because we were out and about this morning. I have my overly Canadian, not very good, but classic Tim Hortons
Mhm.
coffee. So,
Oh, wow. I can't believe you went that
hey, hey,
low,
hey, hey.
but
I'm also out of cream, and I didn't want to have to, like make multiple stops on the way home in order to accomplish brewing coffee, which would then just take longer. So, for the sake of efficiency, I made a
well,
sacrifice and have shittier coffee today.
okay. Okay. Well, Canada is making news lately.
For all,
Uh, do you want to
yeah,
hear
yeah,
some
yeah.
of the
Fill me in,
news?
because I mean, it's gotten to the point with
Yeah.
Canadian politics that it's safe to assume, and it seems like even people who are pro-liberal and pro-Trudeau's government, um, that even they kind of go, "Oh, it's just another, oh shoot, my brain, what's the word?
Yeah.
Controversy, it's just another one." Like, there's always
Mhm.
something
Oh,
with the
okay.
Canadian government that people are like, there's an ethics violation or some kind of weird controversy that the Trudeau government's embroiled in, and everyone just kind of goes, "Yeah, yeah, we kind of saw that coming." Like, it's become so, you know,
Right.
like easy to deal with
Sounds
because
like
it's so common.
some kind of fatigue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. People are just like,
Yeah, some kind of fatigue to people. Yeah. You know, which kind of is very interesting. It's the same thing that's happening here. And in like other areas, I want to talk about it maybe in a moment. But, just to give you some of the updates about Canada. So right now, Canada on average has 36, um, the 36, oh my gosh. And now I uh, lost track. I think it was 36 a day of assisted suicide people.
oh wow,
And then the other good news is all the Ukrainians are leaving because Canada is too expensive. So all these refugees that come from Ukraine saying they just cannot make it in
where are they
Canada
going?
and they're leaving back somewhere. I don't know
Huh?
where they're going, but they leaving Canada, because it's just too expensive. And and other refugees too. It's not about the Ukrainians are the main one because they're one of the latest that came and they're realizing just Canada is not what they expected. What they're hoping to like reestablish their new life. And the third one, which kind of goes along with, I don't know if you see that New Zealand whistleblower, um, that he's a government employee in charge of data collection for COVID. And he noticed a huge increase in unexplained deaths that are more than average. Huge increase. And he's published those data or leaked those data. And now they arrested him and threatening him 7 years in jail for doing that. But those data were outright scary. How many unvaccinated deaths they have. And there is now estimate that somebody made based on that study or on those data, some scientist or somebody estimated it's like 10 million deaths worldwide because of the COVID vaccinations, from the COVID vaccinations. And Canada has 135% increase in unexplained death.
That's just
So
depressing.
that's just some of the news about Canada.
It's
Yeah, it is. It is.
I don't even know how to absorb that, because it's one of those things like that. That
Right.
when you hear numbers like that I think it's, at least for someone like me who naturally comes into things skeptically. That's just my natural inclination, is to kind of be skeptical about something before I really get a
The-
chance to analyze it. And hopefully not too often I come in with a predetermined
Right.
opinion or something, but yeah, that happens. Um, So it's like you hear like 10 million and you're like, okay, come on now. Like that my natural inclination is to think, okay, that's a little overblown. And I wonder like to what level complications are being attributed to a death directly associated with a vaccine. But then I think about all of the stuff that we've learned over the last 2-3 years in terms of like vascular issues, cardiac issues, I guess is more what I mean, and then all these other like mysterious ailments that are kind of happening. And then you think about the population that was subjected to these vaccines, which worldwide is a staggering amount,
Right.
Then 10 million doesn't seem like
New
a very
Zealand
high
and
number.
Canada have almost like I think New Zealand was like 95% people vaccinated, and Canada is pretty close too.
Right.
Huge number. I think it was like 90% or something people in Canada. So you really are a unicorn almost, or your family.
Oh yeah. In a sense, we're outliers. I don't think globally our numbers are so small, but in Canada, for sure. I mean, you are either passionately against the idea of subjecting yourself to something experimental, or you just went along with it right away. I don't really think, for whatever reason, and I don't think it's worth diving into right now, but for whatever reason in Canada, I don't think there was a large number of people who kind of like sat on the fence for a while and kind of debated the marketing, the propaganda, the political belief, like whatever it is, was just so
it's to scare
yeah,
you.
yeah. Like whatever that was, that motion in Canada was so swift that when I look back at like them bickering about, all the unvaccinated people are scum, blah 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 blah, like they were talking about a very small percentage of people already. Like there was a small percentage of Canadians that were holding out, and that's not to say anything negative about the Canadians that got the vaccine. That's not what I'm trying to imply by it. It's just that culturally here in Canada, when the government said this is for the best, let's do it, Canadians largely went along with it. So I think the population of people who have the opportunity to reflect in hindsight and say, well, I'm glad I didn't take that vaccine, are very small, because so many people just did it. Before there was really even a chance to know there were so many risks, because the way it was being presented to people was, this is perfectly safe, and so anyway, pointless little rant, but what I'm saying is I think that the number of people who support the idea of being skeptical about vaccines in Canada now is significantly higher than the number of people in Canada who at the beginning said, I'm not getting it until you show me some more proof. So I think there's a lot of Canadians that also regret getting it, and they're not really wanting to talk about it that way.
But yes, there's some kind of shame now with it too. I feel that way too. I got those first shots, so we would be free to travel, and so they kind of course you. They were stepping the restrictions more and more, so you kind of cave in, partially because of that. And now, yes, I wish we would never, go ahead and, did that, but, we cannot take it back. But there's some certain amount of shame behind it, that we got coursed in like that so easily. Yes, it's something that we have to probably deal for a long time. When you mentioned that fatigue at the beginning, I've been really actually thinking this morning about how strange it is, to find yourself, today, living in a war, because it's not just in United States or anything, but it seems to be like everywhere. When I left, Czech Republic and communism behind, you would think when you came here to North America, there would be no chance, of something like this start happening here. And now, 35 years later, you find yourself that all these issues that in different form, but they are the same idea, basically, to take your freedom away and give power, to kind of unlimited power to people at the top. And also that propaganda that was, so bizarre in Czech Republic with, all the newspapers always, printing things aligned with the Communist Party and what was going on, always in the light of the communist propaganda. And now we see it on a massive scale like this happening in the United States. It sometimes sends me chills, down my spine to, see where we're heading. And I, would love that people here would understand more because they don't get it, because they never lived like through anything like this. And it's like gradually it's being taken away from them, all these different rights and a different, way to express themselves. And it's just, they don't even realize it because they never lived. They're kind of still living in that fantasy that they have a freedom in the United States. And it's the old United States when we have all these rights. Like one thing that I really love about the Designated Survivor show, they have the meeting with the press. And all the press, there's like 50, 60 people in that room, are after them like dog after the bone, like asking all these difficult questions. And then you compare it with what's happening today, and nobody's asking questions, It's just interesting. So, that's kind of what is going through my mind. And I wonder if you're noticing the same thing.
Well, what it made me think, and you kind of mentioned, you kind of touched on it, which is like that people's rights are kind of like incrementally or kind of slowly being taken away. And this isn't to throw you at all under the bus. This is for us to just discuss the kind of like human nature of it and how something like this can gradually happen. And then when you look back at it, you think you can't understand how you got to this position. And Jordan Peterson does a really good talk about it when he's talking about some Polish police officers kind of after the Nazi invasion in World War II, and kind of the progression of this unit, which is relatively well documented from their own accounts of how they went from good police officers that cared about the community and the people that they lived there, and to eventually as effectively being the people that were marching people out into the forest and shooting. And I don't want to get into his whole discussion because it's amazing and people should go and watch it. But that kind of like incremental thing. It's not that you wake up one day and you're like, okay, genocide's for me, sort of thing, right? Or okay, communism is for me. But, and the reason I say I'm not trying to throw you under the bus, but the thing I always found really, really kind of amusing and perplexing over the years when we've had our discussions is the kind of simultaneous knowledge that you've lived it. You've come from, like you grew up in a Russian occupied country under the Iron Curtain and had to work your way out of it. Okay. So you've had that experience, what it's like to be already in the thick of, what generations had left you with over the last couple of decades. You were born into communism, so it's not like you had the option to like be the person voting towards these kinds of things. Now, all that removed, you've left. I'm born. You make it to Canada. Then years go by. You've been living in the United States and in Canada for a long time, and then you and I will have these discussions about kind of politics or whatever, and over the years there will be different things where you will lean to kind of like and I don't think it's very often recently, but over the years you would have this like reaction to why isn't the government taking control of this, or why isn't and I can't think of any specific examples. So again, take this with a grain of salt. But there would be things where you kind of like take a position, and then after you and I are kind of discussing it, and then I throw some Ayn Rand mumbo jumbo at you, you kind of go, okay, maybe the government shouldn't be doing that. And that's what I think about, is you're someone who's lived through this. But when you think of like an isolated little subject, you might think the government ought to be controlling that. And that's one of those amazing quotes from Ayn that I love, which is, it's a pretty simple thing to think about. It's when she says something to the effect of, when someone says there ought to be a law for something, it's almost 100% an indication that there oughtn't be a law for that. Like people's gut reaction is to kind of like, oh, I see an issue, let's get the government to solve it. And the person that makes the first suggestion that way doesn't need to be like a raving communist. They can have the best of intentions and be pro-America and all those kinds of things. But it's that one increment. Now the government has violated our rights, our fundamental liberties in this particular way for the greater good. And then hundreds of bills later, hundreds of amendments later, hundreds of, politicians and elections later, your country doesn't look the same. And it wasn't something that you just woke up when, you know what I mean? So that, I know that's not really what you brought up, but that's what I can't help but think when we're like looking back and saying like, how the hell did America get here? I always kind of want to hedge it with it. It's easy to think that there's some like grand conspiracy to like destroy America. And I think there's some really bad actors, but the simple answer is that we incrementally, one little bit at a time, just let the man take control of that thing. And the result is that we've forfeited more and more of our rights to the government, to where I still look at America as like the bastion of freedom. But I don't do that naively thinking like America is perfect right now, because there are lots of criticisms to be had. And that video that I sent you is one of them. Where it's like you have some serious issues going on, things that Republicans should be able to rally behind and say like, this is just wrong. Let's just not be doing this anymore. And there's Ted Cruz, propping up some legislation or something to try and tell car manufacturers they still need to have AM radios in them. Like, number one, there's better things to do. And number two, where in republicanism and small government does that jive with the government's going to like stand there and tell car manufacturers, you better keep this thing in there, this antiquated thing that you could buy off Amazon, some USB powered AM radio. So there's solutions to be had. But anyway, my rant is done. Sorry, I warped the conversation, but that was what I was thinking with.
Yes, it's it became like everywhere like that, and the government basically, because exactly how you describe it, because people give them so much power, now it's almost impossible to make changes, which is sad, and so when we're still talking about that fatigue, I don't know if you watched that last Republican debate.
I tried to sit through it, could not, but then did watch some pretty important clips from it. But I just can't sit through it. It's so much just fluffing and not answering questions that it's like, it makes me think of those Indy cars, enduro car rallies here in London that we used to go to in Delaware. I know you guys didn't do it, but it was like my cousin used to partake in it and stuff like that. And it's like the people partaking in the event care who wins. Zero spectators care who wins. They're just there for the crashes, right? It's that kind of like reciprocating. That audience is there to see the catastrophes. The guys that are there really, really want to win, and they care about it because there's prize in first place and stuff. That's what those debates feel like. It's like the people on the stage feel like there's a
Right.
point to all this, and the audience is just sitting there waiting for the car wrecks. But anyways, go ahead.
Right. Well, I was kind of again, the Vivek was merciless, and he really brought some really good points. I don't know, again, if
No,
you
no, no.
didn't
Like
see it, it's kind of hard to tell.
are you
And
talking about
I
like
watched
specifically
the, you
his
know,
his
the
leveraging his points against Nikki
yeah,
Haley and the Ukraine war? Because that's and then
definitely the Nikki Haley, and it's just so interesting that we months ago we talk about. Remember, I warned you about Nikki Haley when she was nobody even heard of her, and I had my suspicions. And now all the big donors like BlackRock and stuff, they are all lining behind her, greasing her with money left and right, and with access to advertising and all that, giving her actually now lead over everybody else after Trump. So if they manage to get rid of Trump, she would be the perfect candidate now, to be there and maybe even win, because they start to kind of play the woman, and she's a victim of that Vivek criticism and all
well, you
that.
hear it in the crowd.
And so I watched the PBD podcast.
Sorry, Ninja, but
Yes.
did you hear
So
the
I watched the
crowd's
PBD
reaction?
podcast yesterday.
Did you hear the reaction of the crowd when?
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
like it becomes
Yes.
so painfully
Yes.
obvious that the crowd there is, and again, obviously there are people out there that still support Nikki Haley. She still has a percentage in the polls. Like there are people who are like who think Vivek is the worst person in the world, and that Nikki Haley is being lambasted. But
Well, that's
it's not like a huge percentage of people. The polls indicate that a huge percentage. Anybody who's pro-Trump would listen to what Vivek said, even if they're not pro-Vivek, and have been like, heck yeah, amazing. They wouldn't have been like supporting Nikki in that moment. And that's the crowd was booing Vivek. And then when Christie
yes.
did his stupid little retort, we're like cheering him on. And that's not a representation of what America was thinking. And it's just kind of funny. And again, they choose the audience. So it's not surprising.
I'm not talking about what the America thinking, Alistair. I'm talking about, watching that PBD podcast. They had, talk about the same thing, and they seem to be 100% behind Vivek. They think he's amazing, and he's just have all the data. He has, can deliver things. He's smart, and he has solutions for many things. They are, from all the candidates, they think he's really, really good choice, And then, but they talk about the same thing like we talk about. Then for fun, they went over all the major media reaction to the debate.
Oh yeah.
And it was exactly the same. Chris Christie and Nikki Haley are the winners of the debate, and Vivek is a villain, and all whatever, the awful names they call, they treat him awful. And that's that fatigue, we talked about before, is here's the guy that's telling the truth, about so many things, or bring such a good points that people should go, yeah, wow, that's interesting, Let's, if we don't believe it, let's look into it a little bit. But no, it's just total fatigue, total kind of ignoring him or booing him. And it's sad to me that to see that resistance to hear what he has to say, from the mainstream media and the reactions in the debate. And they don't even ask really right questions. That's the even sad thing. How do you call them, moderators?
Yeah.
I think they're the biggest disappointment of all of the debates so far, because they never really react to anything, to what they say something important, and they would go, well, let's look into it a little bit. You know what I mean? They would actually go and ask some questions. They would actually somehow took it apart, or talk about those. It's just It's just sad. The whole thing is sad. And you have only 4 million people watch the debate. That gives you also, fatigue. Only 4 million people, actually watch the debate.
There's
Which
effectively
is, sad.
yeah, there's effectively an entire social science behind debate strategy, and then formal debate is something that universities have in various ways done a really good job of perfecting. And then and then moderators in those kinds of formal debates have very stringent training. They have very specific guidelines of what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to interact with people who are debating, because they're not supposed to be influencing things. They're supposed to keep things in track. But then arguably the most important debates that are broadcast live to the American people, do we get those moderate? No. Let's get news anchors to be the moderators, because they're TV personalities. It's like, even that alone should be pretty indicative of whether these debates are anything more than like fluff pieces, really. And it obviously isn't always turning out that way when you have an agitator like Vivek there, but that's really what it is. It's the RNC funding some kind of debate that allows for all of their candidates that they're allegedly propping up as potentials to get their talking points in. It's not really to have a debate, like that. Anyway, that's not how it comes across to me. So that's why I feel like the actual news bits and like some of these things that are entertaining to talk about or enlightening to see how the system works when you have Vivek pointing these things out.
Right.
I also simultaneously completely understand why Trump is just not going. Like there's no substance to these things. They don't really seem to have any long standing beneficial effect, and I'm still holding out hope. Like I'm not specifically pro-Trump. There's tons of his policies that I don't agree with, and I don't think he's presidential. And that's irrelevant right now when the country's in the trouble that it's in. At this point, I don't. That's the lowest on my rung of things to be concerned about, because being presidential, like Obama, are in my lifetime arguably the most presidential, refined, well presented, well articulated, represents the entirety of the nation on behalf of its people. Like, that's amazing. And then I disagree with all his policies. So at this point, I don't really care about people being presidential. But I still just don't like Trump. There's something about his policies and his approach that I would love to see Vivek there and not Trump. But it's pretty obvious it's not going to happen. So I'm holding out.
Vivek definitely he's definitely best candidate right now.
But right now I'm still holding out hope that
but he will not get it.
Yeah.
Right.
But maybe he'll be vice president. We've talked about it in the past.
See,
and I don't know if it's the most strategic move for him and whether Trump would endorse that kind of alignment towards the end. But my fingers are still crossed for that, because I just see that being the strongest position. Go ahead.
He's young, so he will get his chance. If he doesn't get, fed up with politics, he has, made up enough name for himself that, next election he can really step into it, and the things probably going to get much worse by then. So people might listen more. But one of the things that was interesting now, that makes me really think is why the Democrats are not more concerned about Biden running for the president and him totally not being, in there, and his, polling really bad against Trump. Now it makes more sense because, the people that run the country would be totally happy with Nikki Haley being president, because she would go along with what they want. She would not rock the boat, and she would go with military complex, she would not have any issues with it. So I can clearly see, for me at least now, that there's going to be some kind of way that, they're going to get rid of Trump. There's no even doubt about it. They're going to find a way, to make him not run.
You
And
think
then
so?
Nikki Haley would be the perfect, candidate
Like,
for them to be voted in, and they don't have to worry
sorry,
about
you
it.
think
What I
that's the
mean?
intention?
Even though she's
Or
Republican,
do you think, or do you genuinely think that's
yes,
what's likely
it's
to happen?
shaping that way. That's I think that's both. Remember I tell you about Nikki Haley? That was like months ago when she was just not even, just starting. Have like 3% in a polls, and nobody even really paid attention to her. Well, it's shaping kind of that direction very clearly now. Because she'll be perfect. Another Obama, imperfect in power, that would just totally play along whatever the establishment wants.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's scary, but that's where
the
it's
scary
heading.
part to me is that if you're right, if for some reason they get it so Trump won't go, like isn't on the ballot, isn't eligible, whatever the case is, then there's obviously enough push behind it that Vivek also won't be. Like, you don't get rid of Trump and then you allow Vivek to be the nominee. Like, you know what I mean? Like that.
Of course.
Right. So
yeah,
it's going to end up. It's going to end up being. But then, my fear is that then you actually have like a landslide transition to someone like RFK, who to me is a terrifying prospect as well. I adore the guy, but I also would never want him to be president because his policies would also terrify the shit out of me. Like, he is a diehard socialist and Democrat at heart. Now, he sees injustices and want to do something about it, and I want to give the guy a hug, like, and I did see they had a good. I didn't watch all of it. I kind of watched the first 45 minutes or so of it, but he was on Patrick Bet-David's one of his podcast things there, where he kind of allowed RFK to come on and do a town hall, and and again, like, I just, on a personal level, I really, really like RFK. On a policy level, he terrifies me, and there are some pretty alarming polls that indicate that if the MAGA right weren't able to vote for Trump, that there would be a substantial or healthy number of them that either out of just sheer opposition to the system that bucked Trump, and again, that's assuming if Trump doesn't run independently, because that's always the other option. Like, there's two questions. How do they get him out of it? Is it the RNC that managed to do something that keeps Trump off of the ballot, but he's still legally eligible to run? So Trump will just run independent, and then he would have a much better chance than Ross Perot ever did at this state and time, with the number of people in the United States that are pro-Trump, period, and the number of people who are just anti-establishment, right? So, like, if he swung independent, there's a chance there. If people think RFK has a chance right now, then watch if Trump goes independent. But I don't think Trump wants that. I think Trump also wants to save the Republican Party in his eyes. So he's not going to abandon that unless they force him out. So anyway, my whole point is...
Yeah, it's going to be so interesting. I'm not looking forward to it, to all these things. But I'm not looking forward to, if it doesn't come out any half good way, where are we going to be in the next, 4 years, as a country. I don't know if you heard that, that Speaker of the House that got ousted out, that McCarthy.
Yeah, now he's dropping out of politics.
Yeah. He's dropping out of politics at the end of this year. Now, he originally promised he would stay to the end of his term, which means if he leaves now, suddenly that slim majority that they had in the House might be gone. Because, if he leaves, that they might now lose that little bit voting power that they had.
And then suspiciously...
I mean, they seem to be doing one step after another, those Republicans, to just undermine themselves. I just don't get it. It's just, I just don't get it.
Yeah. And then suspiciously, I don't like that George
Well,
Santos guy. He seems very, very skeevy. But it also, like, it was one of those things where, like, we knew about the fraudulent representation of his history, all those kinds of things, like 2 years ago, like a long time ago.
yes.
And just now, suddenly it's really, really important to try and censor him again, to try and get him kicked out, to go through all of these process and rigmarole to try and get it kicked. I
They
know.
already did.
But this is what I'm
He's
saying.
out.
It's just
Yeah.
the conspiracy theorist in me, to be fair, because I don't know, I have any data behind it. But it's confusing. You have a very, very slim margin of control in the House currently, and you're shooting yourself in the foot every opportunity that you get in the House, because
Right.
you're just axing off, and in both cases, in ridings that aren't guaranteed to swing Republican if there's another election. You know what I mean? Like, Santos was in a blue state. He's a Republican that was nominated in a very, very blue state, in a very, very blue area. They just so happened to get elected because he didn't come off so super uber Republican and claimed all the stuff that he claimed in
Right.
in his campaign, right? And then same thing with McCarthy, California. You know, like you shouldn't
Right.
take these seats in these ridings for granted, because there's so much political pressure in that area to swing it back blue, right? So it's just concerning, it's alarming,
Right.
and at a time when you could be making significant
Right.
change,
Well,
but Ted Cruz and the Senate is over here talking about, what car companies should be doing, and then in the House we're getting rid of a few of the extra votes that we might have in order to do things. Anyway.
yes. Yeah. It's just, yeah, it's hard to understand, and, I just was reading today, you know the Kerry Lake
Yeah, from
in
Arizona.
Arizona?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, Trump's considering her for VP, as one of his candidates for VPs. But, it's so interesting because, she lost the election by 17,000 votes. Okay. And there was lots of weird things happening during that election. Like the machines would not accept the ballots because they supposedly printed them wrong size,
Yeah, I remember.
There was so many strange things happening with that election. So she's been disputing it for trying to have lawsuits. And every time, like the last lawsuit she had, they all deny her 2 of the lawsuits. Now the third one she wanted to examine the ballot envelopes for validity. And it's supposed to be public record. So anybody should right to examine them. And judge denied her the right to examine that. And if you would read, the decision, she basically called her like a naive person in so many, 12 pages, basically put her down. She has that Goldilocks thinking that she can, come up with some kind of solution in her favor or some kind of thing, when there's nothing. And they will not allow her to look. That's what I don't understand.
When there's
there were so many
nothing,
different lawsuits
without citing that
trying
themselves.
to examine the election, and they're blocking it. They're not allowing them to actually truly examine many of those election records. It's just mind-boggling that there's such an unwillingness to look at it, even. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I don't get. Why things like that should be so open that anybody should be able to examine that and, determine, yes, it was, honest, or it wasn't. It's just hard to understand, some of those things that keeps happening.
And then I'm not following it
lots of things too.
very closely, but the New York Trump case has been just from the information that I'm hearing about it, it's just kind of like one thing that's brought up by I wanted to say Crown because I'm here in Canada, by the prosecutor, and then some expert that comes in and says, no, that's not what those tax records mean, or no, that's not what those financial records mean. It's just, and it's been going on for weeks. Murder trials sometimes don't last this long.
Right.
But I haven't heard, even on the traditional media, they're just kind of not talking about it. I haven't heard, really of any kind of coverage that suggests that the state is doing an impeccable job and Trump is almost for sure convicted here. Like, they're just kind of ignoring it because it's going so horrifically bad as far as I can tell. Or, to be fair, I don't read very much of that media, so maybe I'm just not seeing it and I don't get exposed to it. But it's kind of surprising.
I see headlines, but they are mostly headlines like if the judge makes some small decisions about something, like allowing this or some small, things. They are against the Trump. Usually, there's a big headline about it somewhere. That the judge, did something, against the Trump, indicated Trump did something wrong, know. So it's just sure interesting cases. I love the lawyer that he has. That girl from Syria.
Yeah.
She's just really, she is really good, and I'm hoping that she will be able to make a difference, or honestly, in this corrupt system. But I really like her because she really is, something that I would love to have as a lawyer for myself. She is, really good, which doesn't really mean anything at the end because it can be as the best lawyer ever. And the judges have an awful power to decide basically, against everything, and then have to go to the higher court, to deal with it. Which is
just silly. The way this is done, that would be my prediction, is that no matter how much they've made a solid case for Trump in this particular example, like I don't foresee that court, as just my uneducated opinion and guess, I don't foresee that court not trying to convict him in some way on something. So, but everything that's brought up in this case that's being presented right now is going to be eligible for review in the appellate court. So again, I don't think it will stand.
Right.
It's like it can't stand once an unbiased judge looks at it, because that's just, there's one way that financial reporting works, and then there's the way the judge was saying it should work, which is just not the case. And they had countless experts come on and explain that this is how financial reporting works. The bank was happy, the loan lenders, the creditors, like everybody was happy.
Right.
So shut the heck up. So in an appellate court, he's going to get off. But then how long does that take? And what are the ramifications of it when they find him guilty, and then he has to go through the process of taking it to the next higher court and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
It's just, oh.
Yes. Yeah. I just learned an interesting thing today. There seem to be American journalists in prison in Ukraine now for 3 months or something, because they reported something against Ukraine and Zelensky. And the State Department knows about it, and they won't even talk about it. And Tucker Carlson and Elon Musk, I guess, brought it up. I just saw it today.
Oh, did you?
And they tried to, start questioning, what's going on.
I'd heard it mentioned.
Wow, this is going to be really cool.
I've heard it mentioned a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny. It's funny.
It's news. Yeah.
It's funny. Like, I didn't know specifics about it because it's just mentioned in passing. Like, oh, there's like a journalist that's been over there, and then don't hear a name, don't hear. So it's kind of like unsubstantiated kind of rumors, as far as I could tell, that I didn't have any concrete information of. So I'd be curious to come to light. But it's like, you were able to negotiate the release of a prisoner in a very bad deal, but whatever, with a country that you're actively an aggressor to, with Russia. to get that basketball player
Right.
released, right? But your stated ally that we have written like a blank check to, you can't come to some kind of agreement, even if the agreement was that they are brought back to the United States to face their jail time here, which would be ridiculous, right? Like there should be a court case, all of that kind of stuff. But I'm just like, to not be able to do that, to say like whatever charges you're bringing against them, we will honor that here in the United States, but they're not going to be stuck in jail in a war-torn country as an American citizen. Get them back over here. Anyway, it's kind of
right. And there's a more disturbing news about it now coming up. It's being tortured, physically.
Right.
So yeah, that would be pretty embarrassing if they would really be true, for the current administration, and they're totally ignoring it. Yes, I'm just hoping now when Tucker Carlson and Elon Musk seem to be, put their interest in it, be kind of curious to see what's going to happen with that. So yeah, be interesting to follow up that story. But those are just those things that you just puzzling what is going on, with yeah, it's kind of just hard to understand,
Elon Musk has been really amusing though. I kind of like, I've really grown to really appreciate and like the guy, over not just from like a techie geeky perspective, but from the kind of stances that he's taking on things. But I do worry about him. Like I genuinely worry that he's going through like the quintessential existential crisis. Because and this isn't a criticism to him, because
what does it mean when you say something like that?
So what I'm seeing in him is a recognition that there's a lot of things in the system that are inherently wrong, and he seems to be trying to take a stand, like on censorship and free speech, and he's made comments about like the war industry being propped up by governments and these kinds of things. So he's taking a stand about a lot of stuff. But if you look back at Elon Musk for the 20 years after he, was one of the founders of PayPal, kind of launched his career and on through to making Tesla and everything else, is that he notoriously supported left-wing candidates and ideology, and was a very, very populist kind of guy. Like 10 years ago, I don't think anybody would have thought Elon Musk would be the pro free speech, let's get Alex Jones back on Twitter guy. No one would have thought that. And this isn't a criticism to him.
I think really shocked me.
Yeah, like to see him go through this is like awesome and it's amazing. But that kind of thing, that kind of change takes a toll on somebody. Because regardless of whether they're right or wrong, because he's entering a stage in his life where, irrelevant to what is truly good and bad, he is now adopted a lens that the actions he's doing now he sees are as right, and by default he must see many of the actions he took previously as wrong. And so that layers guilt. Like when you're going through those kinds of changes, you're like, I see a better way. Holy shit, I was a terrible person. Like those two things happen at the same time, and it's probably good to have a counselor and a therapist to get through that kind of stuff, because you got a lot going on in your life, including running billion-dollar businesses while going through that kind of emotional turmoil. So I've seen like a couple of interviews and stuff with him lately. And again, I say this with all the love and affection in the world for the guy now. But it almost seems like sometimes like he's losing it. And that worries me. I say that not as a criticism, but as a genuine like concern, because I can't imagine what this guy is going through, being kind of the center. He's put himself up on the billboard as the like quintessential far right extremist, even though he's not at all. He is as centrist and moderate as you can frickin' get when it comes to this kind of stuff, and just wants to stand on principle about some things. But he knows, he's not dumb. He knows, like, every single opportunity someone can say, look how far right something is, they're now pointing at Elon Musk as an example, you know, and that puts you in a really, really weird position. It affects your businesses. When he says advertisers can fuck off, awesome clip, it's going to go viral, it has an effect on your business, like, inherently. And I think he's smart enough to know that his businesses can get through it, but he's not someone who doesn't, he's not someone who comes off to me as being completely uncaring about whether his companies can pay their payroll, right? So, like, he must be saying these things and doing these things with this overwhelming, like, when people don't understand why CEOs should make a lot of money, these are the kinds of CEOs that should make a lot of money, because they're making the kinds of decisions that add in, like, we would be gray instantly if we had that kind of weight on our shoulders. And then simultaneously, I'm looking at him thinking that internal kind of crisis that you're going through when you see, like, I want to be making better decisions, and you're doing that while thinking about everything that you contributed to that you now think, oh man, that was wrong. And you're dealing with this all at once. So that's where my rant was.
Right.
I really, really love the guy. I think
about it, Alistair, like,
go ahead.
Right. Just think about it, like, as a Tucker Carlson when he was still in the Fox. The difference between Tucker Carlson now is like a different person, because now he's out of the Fox and he's free, and he can sense that freedom just bubbling out of him. Elon Musk is still in the system. He cannot be, like, totally free, so he does like Tucker Carlson partially a little bit, but it's kind of what you're saying, you know, it's kind of you in the middle of it, and you don't have quite the freedom to do it, and there's lots of pressure from all sides. And you get, so I kind of think it's like a Tucker Carlson before he left Fox News. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, for sure. And to some extent, like, that is the same kind of thing. Like, my impression of Tucker is that he's been principled for longer than just since he left Fox. So there didn't need to be a massive change in the way he sees and perceives the world. Maybe there was, but, you know, but he's definitely been freed now to outwardly be the more genuinely true Tucker Carlson that we're getting to know through his show now. I think what Elon has gone through is significantly more extreme than that, in the sense that, again, Elon was a raving leftist for a long time. So it's a huge shift in kind of his ideology, his politics, and his outward look. And again, not to trod on something very emotional that the guy's going through, but, and I don't know how familiar you are with it, but in his personal life, there's also been a massive negative because of where the leftist ideology has gone with his, like, one of his kids, because I believe he's got more than one, but that identifies now as a different gender, goes by, like,
there's like 9 kids. Yes, I think, or something.
But so he is now like one of those parents who gets to, like, live it in their personal life, where, again, he overtly supported left-leaning causes, ideology for years and years and years, and now suddenly wakes up one day and one of his kids is changing genders, and he's just kind of going like, wait a second, slow down, wait a second. And in just saying that, slow down, wait a second, kid disowns him. You know, like, and I don't know all of the intricate details. I don't know if they've been, but this is also happening.
Well, I didn't know anything about it.
All of this is happening while he's dealing with all of this other stuff.
Poor guy.
You know what I mean? So, like, that's why I'm saying, like, I really genuinely worry about the guy. I was one of the large outspoken critics of him in the past, when it just came to, like, people trying to present him as a genius engineer, because the guy's incredibly smart. He has a deep understanding of engineering and those kinds of things. But he is a businessman through and through. That's what he is. He thrives at understanding and
Right.
leveraging risk. He thrives at understanding corporate environments and shareholders and stakeholders and all of that kind of stuff. Yes, he also semi understands engineering, but when he drops as much money as he did into the Hyperloop, something that just a good engineer could look at on paper and be like, yes, on paper that works. In practicality, we're not nowhere close. Like, let's not waste our money doing these. There's some ventures that he went down, or like wanting to make Starlink free for everyone years ago. You know, it was his initial intention. Internet should be free for everybody. I'm going to make it free for everybody. Those kinds of ideas didn't pan out. And it's easy to criticize him then about it, right? Because some of his things, like Tesla, amazing company, groundbreaking profits on it. It's an amazing accomplishment. Then he's had other massive flops. Okay, all that aside, I wasn't one of those people that was like, I love everything Musk does. I was happy to criticize him from my, golden ivory tower over here with my hindsight glasses on that can point at his endeavors that didn't work versus the ones that did, right? But now I genuinely love the guy. I still think he makes mistakes. I still think he's not right about everything. And even right now, I think he's very reactionary to what he sees in the left's ideology. I don't think he has a firm understanding of his new philosophical perspective of the world and how people should interact in it. I think he's kind of being very reactionary, and when he sees
Right.
injustices, he really wants to do something about it because he feels like he maybe hasn't been doing enough good his whole life. But I don't necessarily think all of the things he's getting behind are because he's really thought about like the deep philosophical ramifications, and you know what, that's what I'm getting at. And so you can see that kind of manicness in what he does. Kind of makes me think of like Tom Cruise in interviews.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like when is a successful person who's got his shit together in many, many ways, but then you see some interviews with Tom Cruise and you're just kind of like, is this guy all here? That's the impression I'm getting from some of the interviews that I've
Yes,
seen
that's a good
Elon
point
Musk in.
because I cannot listen. I cannot listen to Elon Musk. Yeah, because it doesn't make any sense to me.
It's difficult to follow him, and it's like you can attribute it to genius in some ways, but like the guy is smart, but he's not Einstein. You know, like the reason he's as successful as he has is because he is more of a human being than a lot of people give him credit for, and that shows in his understanding of like the corporate environments and how personnel interact with each other and stuff. Like he's not some savant that people want to pretend like he has no emotions and is a robot. That's not this guy. This guy is a genuine human being, you know? And anyway, that's my little.
But that's a good comparison with him and Tom Cruise because it was the same thing. Yeah, Tom Cruise is just successful person with business and all that. You know, good movies, but when you listen to him, yes, it's kind of the same thing. It was a good comparison. I like that.
And I
Yes.
hope that
Oh, good.
Tom Cruise isn't offended. You're a great actor. You're still a weirdo, great actor. And I hope Elon's not offended because Tom Cruise is a great actor. I'm not comparing you to him for bad reasons. Oh, anyway. But that's but I do. He's becoming the kind of guy that like I'm hoping that Elon Musk will be remembered in history kind of like Jimmy Carter. And not as President Jimmy Carter, but just as like Jimmy Carter. The guy that like until his dying moment was probably trying to get on site to build houses for Habitat for Humanity. Do you know what I mean? Like he's just a genuinely good person that wants to see good in the world and made lots of mistakes in his life. That's how I'm like seeing Elon Musk. And I know that's a lot of people might be offended that I'm making such a comparison to like a president that wasn't successful at his job and was never as successful as Elon Musk. But anyway, you got to get going.
Okay, it's probably a good time to finish today.
But all right, well, thanks everyone for joining us for another podcast from the Simple Jargon Podcast, or another episode of the Simple Jargon Podcast. Prometheus was a bit lazy today, but he was happy to join us. And yeah, it was a good chat. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And we'll see you guys on the next episode.